Hey everyone, see some new faces, some familiar ones. How's it going? So, like Rob said, I'm Ben Berkowitz, and I'm going to talk to you today about bug bounty behind the scenes. I have been working in bug bounty for about 5 years now, and I honestly just have a really good time with it. I am now the longest serving team member on a bug bounty response team for a major financial institution. I'm involved with their day-to-day operations, triaging the bugs, working directly with the researchers, helping with live events, keeping the program current and up to date. And I got into security because I like to see cool vulnerabilities in action, and bug bounty is one of the best places you get to see that on a daily basis. So today we're going to talk about what bug bounty is and why we should do it. We will talk about how bug bounty fits into an organization's existing security structure, how we collaborate with the researchers in order to do it, the bug lifecycle, and then we'll wrap up a little bit. So starting with, what is bug bounty and why do we do it? We're not going to focus as much on the what as we are the how and the why in this talk, but a general definition is that bug bounty programs are initiatives that organizations operate to enable independent security researchers to report vulnerabilities in exchange for a reward. They hang up a sign that says, hack us, get cash, hopefully everyone's happy at the end of the day. But what these programs offer is a chance for both the researchers and the organizations to establish a code of conduct for both parties so they know how they're going to interact with each other in this sometimes tricky agreement. It specifies the targets and the testing that's within the scope of that agreement. It defines what valid reports are, how researchers can submit them, and it details the rewards and the recognition that the researchers can expect for participating. And this is a key detail because it's what separates a bug bounty program from a vulnerability disclosure policy, which is a challenging thing to say for me right now, apparently, which doesn't provide any financial incentive. There are many organizations that have vulnerability disclosure policies which say, if you find something, you can let us know safely, but we won't sue you. There might not be anything that happens afterwards. You probably don't get paid, and that's not what we're going to be talking about today. We're talking about bug bounty with incentives. So the question is, why should you pay for this? Why should an organization have a bug bounty program? And what it boils down to, and what this talk boils down to, is that bug bounty offers complementary benefits to existing security programs that enable organizations to do things better than they could before with their existing security efforts. So there's some things that bug bounty is really good at that we'll look at today. Some of those things including what I mentioned before, incentivizing walk-in vulnerability disclosure. You may have someone who finds something in your organization. They may or may not tell you about it, but if you're going to throw some money their way, they will come to you first instead of going to maybe some under-the-table thing where they could sell it to someone and get cash. This allows people who are on the honest side of things to go to the right place and let their observations improve security for other users as well. It offers benefits to the organization, such as, fringe benefits from the program are footprinting and blind spot coverage, because an organization, especially a very large organization, may have a hard time keeping track of all of its assets, its compliance requirements, its new acquisitions, its legacy systems, and it doesn't have the same perspective as someone who knows what they're doing, is talented, just sees a big list, and whenever they feel like it, no matter what quarter it is, no matter how busy they are on something else or how busy the organization is, they can start investigating it. So there's a lot of benefits for an organization for footprinting and new blind spot coverage from these researchers. And that gets into the next point, new perspectives, ideas, and methods. In the program that I've been working with for a couple of years, we've learned a lot from the researchers themselves, and we've now reached a point in the bug bounty ecosystem where the researchers are really, really well equipped, sometimes better informed and equipped than the organizations themselves. And so this gives a opportunity for the organization to realize that and change the way that they operate. And then the final point here is it is an earned reputation for collaboration with the security community, which is a very, very valuable thing. There's a lot of organizations that say they care about security, but when you have a bug bounty program, you're putting your money where your mouth is. If there's anyone talented enough to find something, we want to hear about it. And these collaborative benefits are what the focus of this presentation will be. To put it into context, we've got the researchers on the left who know nothing about the greater context of the organization, but they found a bug. They are incentivized to tell the organization that it is a nasty bug because they get paid for it if they do, but they may have a point. They may know a lot about this bug and what it can do. Compare that to what the organization knows is their internal context, but they don't have a great picture of what this bug does. And when we combine these two things, we get the clearest picture of what that bug will mean for the organization in context. The organization can perform an internally driven investigation of this researcher's vulnerability and get the clearest picture. They can understand the root cause better, and they might be able to internally refine and replicate the researcher's methods to try to identify additional impact and instances without active testing, start investigations without there being any fires to put out or new reports, understand that, well, this they found in a public production instance, but we have this whole dev pipeline that's going to be vulnerable to the same thing, and it's just this one report is the tip of an iceberg that the researchers simply could not help them with, and apparently they haven't been able to catch yet themselves. So the thesis, if there is one for this talk, is that bug bounty programs are at their best when they work in concert with traditional security efforts. They do not replace something like penetration testing, but they do some things that it can't. So we'll get into now how exactly they fit into an organization's security. And to do this, we have our demo company, the hypothetical Burrito Barn Banking Incorporated, which is not based on a single one of our clients, but more of an amalgam of different clients that we work with. And they run a very complex and mature security program with a bug bounty program. They're a pretty big company with a large valuation. They've got a large, multifaceted global footprint, websites, mobile applications, other internet-facing services, public, private subscription, and they've got assets, because they're so large, that are both developed in-house, hosted in-house, or they hire a vendor. They may have some legacy systems. They're a large, complicated organization, and we're going to see how they do things. This won't be the same way that every organization should do things. Every organization will need to answer these questions for themselves of how they want to do bug bounty, but this is a realistic portrayal. And the centerpiece of B3 security is their security issue tracker. Everything that they do is based around a central issue tracker that allows them to look at the risks currently facing their assets and their development. And before their assets can develop further, there's a block here, which says until we've got these issues that we're tracking fixed or at the very least addressed in some way, we can't proceed until release and remediation of these systems. And the way that items get onto this tracker is through multiple input sources, such as threat modeling before any testing actually occurs, pen testing, and then bug bounty programs. All of these work in concert with each other, and in the case of Burrito Barn, all go to the same place where they can be directly compared with one another. They're not isolated away from things. The same team that is going to mitigate a vulnerability that comes in through a pen test is the one that's going to mitigate something that comes through bug bounty. And what is also, this currently is starting on the left and moving to the right, but it's really a complete feedback loop, because as this is centrally tracked, we can take lessons that we learn from remediation and use that to inform the testing processes on the other end. If, for example, the bug bounty program identifies an entirely new class of vulnerability that was just discovered and published at DEF CON in the past year, it's usually the bug bounty researchers who are going to get their hands on it fastest, and that is how an organization is going to learn what it means for them, and they can take those lessons and apply it to their pen testing and their threat modeling elsewhere within the organization. So we're going to now not focus too much on the threat modeling. That's a different talk for someone on our advisory team, but we'll do a comparison of benefits between the pen testing program at B3 and the bug bounty program. And I want to make it clear that this is not putting them against each other. These are all complementary benefits, but we can compare. In the pen testing program, the organization is the party that's setting the schedule and the focus for the testing, compared to the bug bounty, which happens when the researchers choose when it's time to test something. They're the assets that are in scope and the type of testing that the organization sets, but the researchers get paid when they find something, and if they spend too much time not finding something, they might move on to greener pastures. So it is on the organization to incentivize those researchers to stay attentive, but we'll get back to that later. And the organization can do things such as increase the bounty temporarily on different things that they want tested or for different types of vulnerabilities that they're looking to address. But the plus side of the researcher-led model is it is not so strictly scheduled. An organization may have a pen test that happens annually or semi-annually and might not look at it that closely, look at that target that closely in between. But there is a chance that on any day of the year, a bug bounty researcher is going to try to find something on it. Next up, we have exactly that point again. A penetration test represents a point-in-time assessment of an asset known to be within the inventory. Whereas, as we talked about before, a large part of the benefits from bug bounty is the continuous testing and the footprinting. The researchers are heavily incentivized to really thoroughly enumerate the bug bounty scope and may ultimately find things that the organization hasn't been able to track as well. And if they're uncertain of what's even there, it's highly unlikely that they're going to be pen testing them, and therefore they fall into disrepair and states of vulnerability. And in the bug bounty program that I work with most commonly we do see that happening where a asset has been decommissioned and no one's owning it, except it's got the firm's name on it, and people can do nasty things with it. So we need to get that remediated. Pen testing is driven by compliance and the risk management internal to the organization compared to the researcher-driven bug bounty investigations, which are guided by the program scope and security trends. So instead of what's currently the main focus of the organization, we have the entire world deciding what might be interesting, and it can be more nimble to, like we talked about before, new and upcoming research. If there's a new tool that changes the way an organization can, or rather researchers can try to find a certain type of vulnerability, they will get to that point faster than an organization which is thinking, all right, we have to finish this compliance requirement by the end of this quarter before we can start making plans for testing anything new. Moving forward, the pen testing partnership is a lot more long-term with custom agreements. It is a partnership less than a transactional kind of thing. And this has the benefits of you get to know an organization, right? They get to know you, you get to know them. The idea of how you're going to interact with each other is nice and predictable and trustworthy. And when we're dealing with researchers, the negotiation aspect is a lot simpler because 99% of all bug bounty interactions are just going to be according to the scope. This is what it's going to cost when, this is what you're going to get when you alert us. This is the types of thing you're going to tell us. This is how long it's going to be. And that simplifies things. But that is also something where we can't get a relationship, like we talked about before, where there's guaranteed attention. The researchers may come and go. When the testing is performed in the pen testing realm, it's done by employees or vetted external consultants compared to the researchers in bug bounty who are freelancers, and they have mixed vetting and skill level, which is something we can get into later, but it is a very, very wide spectrum. But it has its highs and its lows, and some of those highs can be very, very high. There are some full-time bug bounty researchers who really can do it solo, and the reason they don't work for an organization is because they don't really need one. They work best on their own. They've got these lone wolves out there or small groups who are at the cutting edge, bleeding edge of vulnerability research, and they can just submit directly to an organization, and they may take their O-Day and go to different shops, and they can be the first to know. On the other end, we've got newbies with an automated scanner and LLM subscription churning out slop that doesn't provide a lot of value. But we'll get to those folks later. And then the final point here in the comparison is pen testing is allows an organization to have highly controlled environment access, including to non-production environments. Compared to bug bounty, this can be something that organizations do, but it is at the very least a hard sell to invite the general public to come test something besides anything that's internet facing. Why should we give someone who doesn't have a contract explicitly with us access to something internally? It can be done, but overall it is challenging. is what I'll say. So in order to sum it up, the benefits of pen testing are predictable attention and depth, tightly controlled testing access and focus, reliable and trustworthy communication and relationships between both parties, and it's a lot more compliance friendly. Whereas bug bounty incentivizes breadth of testing more than depth. It may cover organizational blind spots and assist with footprinting. The amount of time it takes for a bug bounty researcher to get to the point where they can weaponize some new research can be very, very short. And compared to sometimes a large pen testing organization with tons of consultants, it might not be overnight that they can get each consultant to catch up to that level of skill, as well as they can identify issues in the bug bounty program between routine testing, and there's a potential for continuous 24/7, 365 coverage. And this is not to scale, but the general recommendation that we have based on our experience is our clients should put more resources towards pen testing rather than bug bounty based on the previous slide. I think that in general, if I were trying to run a security program, I would want that predictability. I would want that trust. But the benefits from bug bounty really are there, and it can do things better than pen testing can. So while these two exist in parallel, our opinion is that they should focus more on the pen testing aspect of it and shouldn't try to remove it in the hopes of, well, we can just gamble that no one finds anything and therefore our budget is zero. So a bug bounty program is entirely dependent on the quality of its researchers, but there's a lot that an organization needs to consider when collaborating with them. As I said before, when an organization opens a bug bounty program, they're holding up a sign that says, hack us, get paid, open to the public. This is just like walking down the street and dealing with anyone walking by. So there's a lot of things that you need to consider before talking to the public at large. This can include report requirements, what a report looks like, what a good report looks like, what the minimum standard of information included will be, what the communications between these groups are going to look like, what the triage process is going to look like, which we'll cover at a high level later in the presentation, what the payment arrangements will be in terms of both the amount paid as well as the accounting and money exchanging hands aspects of it. There's the mediation and escalation processes, because we can have two parties who both know what they're talking about but come to different conclusions. We need to know how to handle this. There's the intellectual property and disclosure rights angle, and then legal protections for each party, which my one disclaimer is every program needs to consider sanctions and laws around dealing with bug bounty researchers. Unlike dealing with an organization which may be registered and governed somewhere, this is a freelancer who can be on their own, and they may be somewhere where they don't have a lot of opportunities or have a past or some other side hustle. For the organizations, they, at the very least, might want to validate the ID to make sure that they, say, don't live in a country with sanctions against them, get them in trouble, tank the whole program overnight. So this is an important thing for them to look into, and every organization should perform a legal review before launching their bug bounty program. In order to get the researchers to participate, the program needs to incentivize them. They can do this through generally good reward structures, trustworthy reputation, but if they need to, they can incentivize specific things, such as through campaigns. We're going to have, say, Memorial Day blowout. You've got a long weekend, spend it hacking on us. Rewards are doubled for highs and mediums. That would be an easy way to draw some more attention. Bonuses for specific vulnerability reports on different kinds. And then there's a whole bug bounty community where we can have live events that can be invitational only. Sometimes they're in person, and the bug bounty teams competing from across the world. And those can just be fun to interact with. And if you're an organization with a robust bug bounty program, you can get some really nice finds simply by participating. But in order to run all this, an organization needs their own bug bounty staff to interact with the researchers. So that, at the high level, consists of a response team, a program management team. That's me on the left in the response team. They do things such as validate and evaluate the issues, which we can translate to make sure that they're valid, make sure that they're scored accurately, enforce the program policy with the researchers, make sure they're only testing things the way they're supposed to and only the things they're supposed to. They are the ones who are directly engaging with the researchers on a daily basis and representing the company to the public. A lot of responsibility there. They ensure the report quality. Researchers may not speak the same language as the response team, and they may need to elicit some more details in order to make this valuable. And they inform and coordinate remediation with the rest of the company to say, all right, this team is responsible for tracking this risk, which came through the bug bounty. The SLA has been so many days. Do you have an update? That's something the response team can do, as well as interpret trends and provide analysis to see that feedback loop we were showing before of what can we learn by looking at our entire perimeter that we might not have looked at unless we did a, security posture defining red team assessment once a year, which is really difficult to set up, when we can take 100 bug bounty reports and say, okay, here are some trends. What can we learn about how we're doing? The program management team supports that. They determine the program policy strategy. They manage the scope and the priorities of the program to see which things need to go in and out. They manage the rewards and incentives. They determine and implement this program strategy, and they serve as the escalation point for the response team. To assist with all of this, organizations can use the help of bug bounty platforms. Now, I'm a fan of the idea of using these bug bounty platforms. I don't have a specific recommendation, or we as an organization don't have a specific recommendation of which one would be the best, but this can be really helpful for an organization and the researchers because of the main reason would be familiarity. There's a framework of interactions, triage, communications, mediation, and payment that if you're just one person on your computer trying to scan the internet as your full-time job, it's very comforting when you know there's at the very least someone you can escalate to, things that you can click on where you expect them to be, and someone can argue on your behalf if things go sideways. They set standards for both parties to make sure that both are acting fairly, including protecting the researchers from the organization, because this is something that we need to consider, and they act as third-party mediators when there's a disagreement. They provide rankings, reputation, and other gamifications for both researchers and organizations. If you are a top-rated bug bounty program, you're simply going to get more attention than if you're not. And as needed, response staff on demand if all of a sudden there's a new ODA or a new toolkit going around and the number of reports doubles overnight. Instead of having to hire someone for a week, you can tap into the professionals at one of these platforms and get some additional help. So looking on the other side, we've got the researchers, hobbyists, people who don't do security full-time, moonlighters, people who do it full-time but a little more on the side, and the full-time independent hunters are the folks I was talking about before who can be so sophisticated they are constantly scanning for changes to the bug bounty scopes that they will find changes before the organization does, file a report immediately, and maybe get paid within 24 hours of a change happening, even though that change wasn't done on purpose. And that's just how these things can go when an organization is so large with so many moving parts. But it also includes some low-skill beginners, which need to be handled delicately because often their hearts are in the right place and they can simply find things. And the confused but well-intentioned who don't quite know the difference between security, vulnerability, and they're locking themselves out of their account as a denial of service. Not always the same thing, but the bug bounty researchers, for the most part, are helpful, clear, friendly, understanding, and good at following rules, and sometimes none of those things or some of those things and not all of them. But it is important that an organization understands how to delicately handle these folks because they are the lifeblood of a bug bounty program. Bug bounty does not exist without the researchers, and if you're an organization that's trying to have a successful program, the researchers need to like you. And they are the resource of bug bounty, not necessarily the program. So we'll cover at a high level and kind of swiftly the bug life cycle. It may be familiar to some folks in the room, but it is built into phases. The arrival phase, triage phase, remediation phase, submission, bug comes in, it gets validated by the team. They try to see if they can fully understand the impact. In the triage, they score it and then give a reward based on that score. They being the bug bounty response team most of the time, and then the remediation phase, which we won't cover that much because the bug bounty program is really only in those first two phases. If an organization has a mature security program, this final part of remediation, retest, and closure only is a little bit different than normal. Everything else is already there because they're tracking all those bugs from, or all of the security risks here from their threat modeling and their pen testing programs. In the arrival phase, the researcher submits a report, probably the most important part of this whole operation. The team then validates, is the behavior described within the program scope? Can the organization authorize the researchers to test this asset? Are they doing the right type of testing? Are they testing for the wrong kind of bugs? Are they going beyond the rules? Or next one is the report a duplicate, which I have a little bit of explanation about afterwards, to try to parse, is this something that's really new? Is this something someone reported last week and we haven't fixed yet? Is this something someone reported 2 years ago that we haven't fixed yet? Is this something that we found over here and technically we have an investigation on over there, but is that a duplicate? We'll get to that in a minute. And then in the reproduction stage, so I moved my mouse and messed it up. Can we reproduce and confirm the researcher's claims? Is there actually any impact here? If we do what they do we get the same results? Does it work on my machine? And can we find out anything that the researcher doesn't know based on our internal knowledge? So in this phase, an organization needs to determine their duplicate policy and their scope policy, which we don't need to go into high detail beyond what I had done before, but it defines what is a duplicate. Is it multiple teams? Do we need to have 2 tickets just because these 2 teams work in different time zones? Do they have the same code base? Will the fix work? So therefore, this is not 2 reports, it's just 1. If this has been discovered previously on a pen test, but a researcher found it, well, they found a bug in a place they're supposed to find it. Do we pay them, even if we already knew about it? Do we share the original report with a duplicate researcher if they're really exactly the same? Or what if that duplicate adds a new value that the original one didn't? What do we do in that situation? And then for the in-scope policy, it's what's the minimum thing we want to accept? Do we accept that there's a theoretical cryptographical vulnerability in a version of a site that's not even in production as something we're going to pay hundreds of dollars for? Or do we want to say, yeah, you could try to DOS us, we're confident. Let's be careful with that. So that also falls into forbidding testing and forbidding assets. Payload guidance, for example, if you get remote code execution, maybe just get a ping back to us instead of taking down an entire server. As well as traffic attribution, which is a little thing that can help with the incident response, something like a header in the traffic that says, hey, I'm doing this for bug bounty, so don't panic and file an incident. In the triage phase, we've got scoring and reward, which is where the organization answers the question, how quickly do we need to address it? Who do we need to get to address it? Is this a small fire, big fire, everyone run out of the building type of fire? I don't know how I'm doing this. Sorry, folks. Who do we need to inform? Which can mean, is this an incident? Do we need to report this to someone? Or is this just something we need to act on in the next couple of cycles? And then is our evaluation fair and defensible? Meaning, is this researcher trying to call everything a critical because they want to get paid? Or is there something here we haven't realized yet? If we decide this way now, does that make sense with what we've decided in the past? Can we be fair with them? And once the scoring is allotted, we have the reward, which is how much do we reward for this report? Are there any additional bonuses we can give? Did it happen during a campaign? Did they have a really neat proof of concept that showed us something we didn't think was possible before? Are they a top-class researcher that we want to keep interested in us and maybe we throw them a bone to keep them involved? And then when are these folks going to get paid and how is that going to happen? All of these decisions are usually guided ahead of time by the scope, so they're not that cumbersome to operate on the day, but it's sometimes nice to consider other other case-by-case basis details, such as how much effort they put into it, if this is a detail that adds, duplicate rather, that adds a new detail we didn't know about before, and technically it doesn't get a reward, but we can give them a bonus. Reward phase details covers what I said, so I'm going to go past this slide with the exception of the last one, which is what if something is valid, but we've decided as an organization we're going to risk accept it. This is something that we're going to devise in a month. We can't, in good conscience, pay you for finding this vulnerability. That could be something that can cause some debate. And then finally, we've got the remediation phase, which, as I mentioned before, we won't cover in too much detail, but This is when the internal teams advise on a fix, including the bug bounty response team who's working directly with the researcher. They consult with the vendors and developers if the bug is in the organization system or an asset controlled by the organization, but that is the property of one of their vendors. Often this is easier than you might think. If it's something like a CDN, actually they are usually very, very cooperative, and they coordinate the fix mobilization of getting the teams to act on the tickets in question. The only difference between retesting in the bug bounty world versus in the pen testing world is, do we invite the researcher to participate in testing the intermediate fixes? If it's something that's public-facing, this is something that can happen, but it can incur additional rewards on the researcher because you're paying them for their time. It would be the nice thing to do. And then finally, in the closure area, we need to mark it closed if there's a bug bounty platform that we're using there as well, so that we can track their reputation and then tell the researcher that it has been done. And while it doesn't show up on this slide, the reward happens well before the remediation phase. In order to keep researchers interested, pay them when they've found something that we accept, not when we've closed it, because first of all, that can take a very long time. And second of all, we want to keep them coming back and keep them attentive. So to conclude, bug bounty programs really can boost organizational security, and they are at their best when they work in concert with the other efforts and they actively engage security researchers and the larger community. They're not something that's going to replace pen testing, in our opinion, anytime soon, but there's some things that it can do better than really anything else out there. So thanks, everyone, for listening. I don't know if I have that much time for questions if you got them, but I'm holding the floor or not. You can find me later at the event, and I'm happy to answer them. And if you're interested in learning anything more about this, this is something that we are offering as a company. So find me after this. I'd be happy to tell you more. Thank you.